Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
The first story tonight was sent in by someone who worked the graveyard shift at a remote gas station in Montana. What unsettled them most wasn't what they saw, it was what they still don't understand. The woman at pump 4 had been standing there for over an hour. I only noticed because I'd been watching the security monitors during a dead shift, and she hadn't moved once. I was working the overnight at a Sinclair station off Route 191 in eastern Montana. Middle of nowhere doesn't begin to describe it. The nearest town was 30 miles south, and the only light for miles was the sickly yellow glow of our canopy lights buzzing over the pumps. It was February, maybe 15 degrees outside, and the wind was cutting sideways across the lot, throwing ice crystals against the windows in little ticking sounds. I noticed her around 1 in the morning. She was standing next to the driver's side of a dark sedan parked at pump 4, just standing. Her back was to the camera, and she was wearing a long coat, dark hair blowing in the wind. I figured she was having trouble with the card reader, maybe waiting for someone inside the car. But no one came out, and she didn't move. By 1:30, I started to get uncomfortable. I zoomed the camera in as far as it would go. The image was grainy, but I could see she wasn't holding a pump nozzle. Her arms were at her sides. She was just facing the car. I thought maybe she was on the phone, but her hands were empty. I almost went outside. Almost, but something stopped me. I think it was the way the wind was moving her coat and her hair, but her body stayed perfectly still, not shifting weight, not adjusting her stance, like she was a mannequin someone had propped up out there. At 2 in the morning, I called my manager. He didn't answer. I called the non-emergency sheriff's line, and they said they'd send someone when a deputy was available. Out there, that could mean an hour or more. Around 2:15, I looked at the monitor again and my stomach dropped. She had turned around. She was facing the camera now, but the resolution was too low to make out her face. It was just a pale smudge where features should have been. And I realized she wasn't facing the camera. She was facing the store, facing me. I locked the front door. I'd never done that during a shift before. I turned off the interior lights so she couldn't see me through the glass, and I sat behind the counter watching the monitor. At 2:43, she started walking toward the store, slowly, not in a hurry, just a calm, steady walk across the lot. The wind was screaming outside, but she moved through it like it wasn't there. She reached the front door, and I watched on the camera as she stood right against the glass. I was maybe 20 feet from her, in the dark, behind the register. I couldn't see her face through the glass, because the canopy light was behind her, turning her into a silhouette. She stood at the door for 6 minutes. I counted. Then she placed one hand flat against the glass, just held it there. Then she turned around and walked back to the car. She got in the passenger side, not the driver's side. Someone else was in that car the whole time. The car sat there for another 10 minutes, then pulled away without headlights. I watched the taillights disappear into nothing. The deputy showed up around 3:30. I showed him the footage. He watched it twice without saying anything, then told me to keep my doors locked for the rest of the night. He didn't explain why. I found out later that a woman matching that general description had gone missing from a town about 60 miles north 3 days earlier. I don't know if it was her. I don't know who was driving that car, but I think about the 6 minutes she stood at that door, and I wonder if she was trying to tell me something, or if she was keeping me distracted, while the driver did something I never saw on the cameras. That one has a way of sitting with you, and the next story might be even harder to explain. This one comes from a gas station manager in rural Ohio. It's short, it's strange, and the detail at the end is the kind of thing that makes you question what you're actually seeing on security footage. The bathroom door was locked from the inside, but no one had gone in. I checked the log. I always check the log. I managed a small independent gas station in southern Ohio, just off a county road surrounded by soybean fields. We had 2 single-occupancy restrooms around the side of the building, the kind with the heavy metal doors and the deadbolts you turn from inside. Part of my closing routine was checking both bathrooms at 11 p.m. sharp. I've been doing it for 3 years without incident. That night in October, I went around the side of the building with my flashlight. The men's room opened fine. Empty. I sprayed it down, checked the lock, moved on. The women's room door wouldn't budge. Locked from the inside. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder and announced myself. Nothing. I checked our single security camera that covered the side of the building. I rewound it 30 minutes. No one had walked to that door. I rewound an hour. Nothing. 2 hours. Nobody. I went back to the door and put my ear against it. I could hear the faucet running. Just a thin, steady stream of water. I called the county police. They told me it was probably a stuck lock and that I should try the master key. I'd forgotten we even had one. I found it in the office, a heavy brass key that I'd never used in 3 years. I went back to the door. The water was still running. I put the key in, turned it, and pulled the door open. The bathroom was empty. The faucet was on, a slow stream of water spilling into the basin, but the sink was stopped up, and the water had been overflowing onto the floor. The water on the tile was dark, not brown, not rusty, dark red. I thought a pipe had burst or something had backed up, but when I looked closer, the water coming from the faucet was clean and clear. Whatever was turning it red was already in the sink. I looked into the basin. There was something in the drain catch, a clump of something dark and matted. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the room and called the police again, and this time they sent someone. The deputy fished it out with a glove. It was a thick clump of human hair, long and black, tangled around what he said looked like a piece of scalp. He got very quiet after that and made a phone call I wasn't allowed to hear. They closed off the bathroom for 3 days. A forensics team came from the state. They never told me what they found, or whose hair it was, or how it got into a locked bathroom that no one had entered. But here's the detail that still keeps me up at night. When I reviewed the security footage again the next day, more carefully, frame by frame, I noticed something I'd missed. At 9:47 p.m., about an hour before I did my check, there's a single frame where the image distorts. Just one frame, a fraction of a second. And in that frame, the bathroom door is open. And there is a shape in the doorway. It's too blurred to make out clearly, but it's there. A dark figure, low to the ground like someone crouching or crawling out. The next frame, the door is closed again. The footage runs normally after that. I quit 2 weeks later. The station closed down about 6 months after that. I drive past it sometimes. The bathrooms are still standing. The doors are always closed. I never stop to check if they are locked. I wish I could say these stories get easier to hear, but this last one is the one that genuinely disturbed me. This final story was submitted by someone who was 19 at the time, working at a truck stop in West Texas. I'll warn you now, the small details in this one are what make it so disturbing. Pay attention to the coins. He put exactly $47 in loose change on the counter, and when I looked up, I noticed his hands were shaking and there was blood under every single fingernail. This was at a truck stop gas station off I-10 in West Texas, about halfway between El Paso and Van Horn. If you've driven that stretch, you know it. There's nothing, just flat scrubland and darkness that goes on forever. I was 19, working the 3 to 11 shift because it paid $1 more than days. He came in around 9:30 on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were dead. Sometimes I wouldn't see a single customer for 2 hours. The lot was empty when he pulled in driving a white cargo van, the kind with no windows in the back. He parked away from the pumps, off to the side, near the air hose station. He was maybe mid-40s, thin, wearing a plaid button-down with the sleeves rolled up. Normal looking. That's what I keep coming back to. He looked completely normal, except for the shaking and the blood. He asked for $47 on pump 3. I told him his van wasn't at pump 3. He just stared at me for a moment, then said very quietly that he'd move it. He didn't move it. He just stood there looking at the coins on the counter. I started counting the change because I didn't know what else to do. Quarters, dimes, nickels, no pennies. While I was counting, I noticed a smell. Faint at first, then stronger. It was sweet and metallic, like copper and rod. I thought it was coming from the coins, but it was coming from him. I activated the pump because I wanted him to leave. He thanked me without looking at me and walked outside. But he didn't go to the pump. He went back to his van. I watched him on the monitor. He opened the back doors just wide enough to slip inside, and he pulled them shut behind him. The van sat there for 20 minutes. I could see it rocking slightly, very slightly, like someone was moving around inside. Then the back doors opened and he stepped out. He walked to pump 3, picked up the nozzle and just held it. He didn't put it in the van. He didn't squeeze the handle. He stood there holding the nozzle, staring at the digital readout on the pump, which still reads 0. I was about to get on the intercom when he suddenly looked directly at the camera mounted on the canopy. He looked right into it. Then he smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile. It was the kind of smile you'd give someone you recognized, like he knew me. He hung up the nozzle, got in the driver's seat, and pulled out of the lot heading east on I-10. I was shaken, but I figured it was just a strange encounter. Weird people come through truck stops. That's what I told myself. Then, about 40 minutes later, a woman pulled in. She was driving fast, and she came inside almost running. She was crying, and she asked me if I'd seen a white van. I said yes. She asked which way it went. I told her east. She grabbed my arm. She said her sister had been taken from a rest stop near Las Cruces 2 days earlier. She said the police had a description of a white cargo van. She said her sister's name, but I won't repeat it here. I called 911. They said they were already aware of the situation and that units were responding. The woman left, driving east. I went back to the register and looked at the pile of coins I still hadn't put in the drawer. I started putting them away, and that's when I found it. Tucked between the quarters, there was a small silver ring. A woman's ring. Thin band, no stone. Just a plain silver ring. The police came by the next morning and took the ring. They took the security footage too. They asked me a lot of questions. I told them everything. They never followed up with me. I never found out what happened. I don't know if they caught him. I don't know if the woman found her sister. But I know this. When I counted the change after the police left, the total he'd put on the counter, minus the ring, was $46.50, not $47. He'd counted the ring as part of the payment. I think about what was in the back of that van. I think about it rocking in the parking lot 20 feet from where I was standing. I think about the blood under his fingernails and the way he smiled at the camera like we were sharing a secret. I don't work nights anymore. I don't work at gas stations anymore. And every time I see a white cargo van, I check the driver's hands.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.